Hey, I'm Shaye Warner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Folks, today we are visiting with Dr. Emma Briggs about the value of calf uniformity. This quick and practical episode offers a lot of insight into how to improve uniformity in calf crops, and as well as what it really looks like as a whole when we're talking phenotype and genotype. So I'm sure you'll like it. I know I enjoyed the conversation. And with that, let's hear from Emma. Hey folks, a quick heads up before we get back to the conversation. If you are frustrated with your current cattle ID setup, hard to read tags, faded ink, handwritten notes that don't hold up, or just not knowing how to link visual tags to EIDs, you're not alone. That's where cattletags.com can help. Their team works with ranchers who know something needs to change but aren't sure what the next step should be. They help sort through numbering systems, tag layouts, visual tags, and EID options so everything works together, both in the field and in the chute. Cattletags.com is one of the largest all-flex distributors in North America. If you want an ID system that actually works on your ranch, learn more at cattletags.com. All right, Emma, well, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast today, and we are going to be talking about the value of uniform calf crops and kind of what producers can do to increase uniformity in their calf crops. So thanks for joining us today.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
So to get started, tell listeners a little bit about what your role in the beef industry is today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the cow-calf sector of the beef industry, and I've kind of made my way along to Kansas State University. I'm currently the faculty supervisor for the research feedlot and the commercial cow herd for Kansas State University Ag Research Center located in Hays, Kansas. I have a 70% research and 30% extension appointment here at K-State.
Okay. And so I'm curious, why are you passionate about beef?
So I'm really passionate about the beef industry. It's something that's just, instilled in me for a really long time, growing up. I've been doing everything within the sector, and from a very young age I knew that I wanted to work with beef cattle. Now that dream changed a little bit down the road as I was, started from a young child all the way up to getting into this point, but I always knew that my main goal was to help producers help themselves, and that really led me to the research goals that I have out here in the station, which is really conducting research that applies to producers in the Great Plains, but more specifically Western Kansas.
Awesome. Well, Emma, jumping right into the topic at hand today, I want to start with, what does a uniform calf crop look like? Because it's something when I have different guests on for cattle marketing aspects, like it gets brought up. So let's start there with, what does the uniform calf crop look like to you?
I feel like this really changes and is very producer dependent, but I guess if I had to put some type of label on it, if we're really looking for calves that are born in some type of uniform calving window. Typically, I say within 45 days, if we're trying to keep things a little tighter, up to 90 days. And that's really just dependent on the type of management strategies a producer might have, times of year that you might be calving. Trying to keep that window as close to uniform as possible. And just when we say uniform, we're just saying we want them all born within a very specific time point. A lot of that is going to consist of, what do your cows look like? When do you wean? How do you wean, or how do you sell your calves? Are also questions to come into consideration, and trying to make sure that they're within 50 to 75 pounds of each other, trying to make a uniform pot load of steers or split load or heifers, or however you're marketing your calves.
So when you bring that up, you said 45 to 90 days, and that can be a big stretch when you look at calves from the front to the back end still. Do you see those longer calving windows potentially working better for producers who maybe have a larger quantity, just because maybe they could make 2 different loads out of different sizes, or a couple different loads? Or what are your thoughts there when we're talking uniformity and calving window?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, here at the station, we run a 45-day breeding cycle. So that is AI plus 35 days out with the bull for 45 days total. And so we run things pretty tight here. From the research standpoint, we want all our calves to be very close in body weight, close in size, so that way we can do applicable research and make sure we don't have a lot of extra variables like calf body weight really slowing us down. The reason why I do drag that out to 90 is because not everyone wants to calve out 60 heifers within 45 days. Maybe you need them to spread out a little bit longer, or maybe you have a larger herd and maybe you are trying to make, a group of heavy steers and a group of light steers, or maybe you're trying to match up some lighter steers to make a split load for a second and third load, and so that way you can retain more replacement heifers. And so it really just goes off the strategy and what works well for that producer and ultimately where their calves are going to end up.
So additionally, with what does uniformity look like? I mean, are you still considering breed composition, color, overall type and kind? What about some of those factors as they relate to uniformity?
Absolutely, and I will say that uniformity goes beyond just looking at necessarily appearance. It also reflects things like reproductive success for replacement heifers and trying to make sure that you're staying within that 365-day calving interval and making sure that we're efficient and productive as possible on that end as well. Really making sure that our cows are efficient, having a calf, approximately every 12 months is really important. And going back to kind of the key point that you brought back up is really looking at genetic consistency. So using sires that have similar EPDs, making sure that we're not picking bulls that are in the top 1% for growth, and then also picking bulls, that are looking at maybe the 50 percentile if we're picking AI sires. So making sure we're not going to have a lot of frame size differences in these calves either. And that overall helps developing a good replacement heifer strategy, and it also helps on the back end with cow nutrition and maintaining good body condition score. A 1,200-pound cow is going to need a lot more than 1,800-pound cows. So if you had a bunch of 1,200-pound cows, for on the replacement side, you're going to be able to manage their nutrition and supplementation program a lot more precisely, which goes back to nutrient utilization and nutrient supplementation efficiency.
Hey folks, can I steal your attention away for less than a minute? Ranching is a business, and profitable ones don't happen by accident. If you're ready to run your operation with clarity, confidence, and a strategic plan, my new course, Profit Foundations for Ranchers, is built for you. You'll learn how to define measurable success for your ranch, identify where profit is slipping through the cracks, and put systems in place that help you make better decisions faster. This isn't the theory, it's a practical, ranch-tested business training designed to improve your bottom line. It's the same strategies I use on our own operation. Visit casualcattleconversations.com to learn more, and the direct link is in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the episode.
So when we're looking at what drives uniformity, you talked about that calving window. You talked about picking bulls that aren't on opposite ends of the spectrum for growth or whatever traits that matter to you as a producer. What other factors do you see driving uniformity?
Other factors to keep in mind are breed composition and type. You mentioned that earlier, and that just goes ahead of making a uniform set of calves in general, and making sure that they're going to have similar carcass characteristics. You're not going to have anything too high on the spectrum, good or bad, on that aspect as well. And that really goes back to also genetic consistency and making sure that we have predictable performance, which is important whether you're selling your calves at weaning or if you're retaining ownership throughout the yard and selling on the grid.
Okay. I want to touch more on the genetic selection aspect of uniformity, because I think really often we talk about it from the phenotype standpoint because that's what we see, but we don't always see that genetic aspect. So can you just dive a little more into maybe some of the other factors and considerations that ranchers should be looking at to make sure that there's uniformity genetically in their herd?
Absolutely. So one of those big things of creating like a phenotypic, good set of uniform calves is going to be looking at some of those growth traits as well as, so there's going to be all of your traits that are associated with frame size. So weaning weight, yearling weight, mature height, and utilizing those EPDs, but also utilizing the phenotypic data from the bulls also, and making sure that they reflect what their EPDs are saying. I also like to say that, are we looking at a terminal system versus a maternal system? Are we splitting these cows up? Do we have a large enough herd where we can really focus performance on a good set of maternal cows versus having some cows that maybe we're throwing some more terminal foals on, and we're really focused on growth rate, feed efficiency, carcass merit, but not trying to necessarily leave behind some of our maternal EPDs, right? And so those are going to be looking at mature size is a big one, right? A lot of cow efficiency is determined by cow size within itself. Cow size is the major predictor that we have on dry matter intake production, especially on a forage basis, and so looking at that is important. Looking at some of our fertility EPDs as well as a milking ability for those cows, so on both sides. I also think that crossbreeding can also be a really beneficial tool, especially if you are having some animals that can lean towards that terminal side maybe. A crossbreeding system gives us a lot of hybrid vigor and is essentially 3 pounds of lean calf sometimes, depending on the different production standpoint that you have. But making sure that we're consistent in our crossbreeding systems, and so that way we can have some type of predictable result and still maintaining, looking at some of those genomic tools or those EPDs. I think EPDs and other genomic selection tools are a great opportunity because they take a lot of guesswork out of some of these yearling bulls that we might be buying if we're buying them from sales, and making sure that they have some type of genomic test associated to them. Depends on the heritability of the trait, but overall, if they do have genomically enhanced EPDs, it's almost like they have 15 to 25 calves on the ground, and so it can really increase our predictability and making sure that we're selecting bulls that are proven, that are going to lead us to our ultimate goal, which varies from producer to producer, but having a goal and having traits that you look at to make a uniform goal and just sticking with those and trying to stay away from single trait selection is a really good aspect.
So Emma, we really focus this on the cattle marketing aspect and the value of calf uniformity there, but in what other ways is calf uniformity valuable to the rancher?
I think calf uniformity can be really important to the rancher because it helps put a little bit more emphasis on keeping calves borderline the same and keeping management strategies very much the same. There's kind of like a two-tailed approach to that, or two different ways to look at it. One, all your cows are going to be on the same field, needing the same field of nutrition, right? So the protein requirements for just any cow are around 8%. That's jump up to around 11% or more as soon as that calf hits the ground, and stays that way until we typically see peak lactation around 90 days or after. And so, making sure that you can strategically supplement to meet your cow's reproductive needs and nutritional needs is really important on a uniform calf crop. And then also making calves uniform helps with management for backgrounding, for weaning, keeping them, tight on that end, and, giving the vaccines at the correct time, because there's nothing more frustrating than having a 90-day-old calf with a 1-day-old calf, and you need to work those 90-day-old calves or more, and you need to give them all vaccine, but then the 1-day-old calf can't really have it quite yet. And so trying to clean up and make those calving windows a little bit tighter makes things a little bit easier also in the management strategy, and making sure that we give these calves the vaccines they need, and so that way they can stay healthy and make it to these 1,500 pound marks that we're pushing them to on the other side of the feed yard.
All right. Emma, is there anything else we haven't touched on with this conversation that you think is valuable for listeners to hear?
Yeah, so uniformity doesn't really happen overnight, and I think that if you are looking to maybe you have a 90-day breeding season, maybe you're trying to cut that back down to 60 days or 45 days and trying to tighten up that window, one way to do that is on the reproductive side. And so synchronizing your cows, even if you're not using AI technology, a simple one-shot PG can really push your cows to come into cyclicity sooner, and then they all come into cyclicity at the same time, which is also really important. And so utilizing those reproductive steps can help tighten that window over time.
All right. Well, Emma, if there is one last thing that listeners take away from this conversation, what should it be before we wrap up?
I would, look at your breeding season. I think that monitoring cow body condition score, looking at your breeding window, and making strong genetic decisions and trying to tighten those windows and create a uniform calf crop are all really important, and maintaining consistency and improvements from year to year. Other things I would also like to share is that the K-State Research and Extension and Beef Tips have a lot of good resources at Kansas State University. Also, the Beef Reproductive Task Force has a lot of really great resources also. If you are looking to do certain management strategies on the repro side to tighten up your herd, as well as if you are looking at things like a guide for genetic evaluations, breed EPD interpretations, the Beef Improvement Federation is also a great resource to look at, and talk to your local extension agents and specialists out there, and we'd all be happy to help you tailor your breeding season, your nutritional plan, and make sure that you guys are all very successful moving forward.
Well, Emma, thank you for your time today, and listeners, I will include some of those links in the show notes. And if you don't see them and you can't find them, be sure to reach out to me and I'll make sure that you can access them. You can always connect with me on my website. Remember, the best way to support this podcast and all your other favorite podcasts is to leave a rating or review, and better yet, share it with a friend who's going to find this information valuable. But with that, happy ranching, folks.
RanchChannel.com. I'll give you just a few seconds to head there on your phone. RanchChannel.com, your farm and ranch network on demand. Bull sales, western events, product information, right at your fingertips on the ultimate cowboy-friendly platform. Want to follow up-to-date markets? RanchChannel.com. No need to dig for information on all these different websites. It's all right there on RanchChannel.com. Y'all are loving it now, aren't you?